Good morning, America. How are ya? Monday Morning Rail. Hi, I'm Denny Jelsma, and I'm at the world-famous Jacksonville Terminal Railroad Museum in beautiful Jacksonville, Florida. And today is Monday, and you know what we do on Monday? You're right. It's show and tell starts right now.
Hi, my name's Greg Turn. You may remember me. I did the show and tell on the Baldwin locomotives that Seaboard had. But today I'm going to talk about scenery a little bit, because that's one of the main things that I've done around here. When I first came down here, the layout stopped right here. There was no St. Mary's Bridge. There was no Bowden Yard. There was no, those of you that have seen the paper mill at Fernandina, that wasn't there. The dock area wasn't there. Okay. The scenery on the bottom level was pretty well done. The scenery on the top level was started in places, but it was very much spotty. And before I came down here, I had worked on a few other layouts, some of my own, others at a couple small clubs that I was in back in Pennsylvania. But none of them had ever gotten to the point where there was any scenery. In fact, the only scenery I can ever remember was a tunnel I had back on my Lionel layout when I was really little that consisted of a hardware cloth covered with brown burlap. So that was the extent of my scenery experience when I got down here. So we're going to look at a few of the scenes that I have done. I certainly didn't do anywhere near all the scenery on this layout by any manner or means, but we're going to look at some of the spots. And we'll, right here at the end of the St. Mary's Bridge, when I got here, the track was in, and that was it. Okay? It wasn't ballasted. There were obviously no trees. The backstop was in, and Rodney wanted the idea of some separation between the two tracks because they represent two lines going in two different directions. So what did I do? Well, I built up some areas. One of the things we had laying around here was some blue foam in 1/2 inch and 1/4 inch thicknesses. So that's what I used to build up the area in the back, this area here in the front. Now what can you do with blue foam other than do this? You can paint directly on it. You can cover it in plaster gauze if you want to. You could use kind of a gort thing to give you the nice contours. I did something a little different, which I've never really seen anybody say anything about. I went to the local hardware store and got a bag of just all-purpose sand. And that has a mixture of sand and some small stones in it. So I would sift it to get the small stones out. And then I used that sand to build up the contours, to kind of take a break from the really sharp areas of the foam. And that was what I kind of did. Now you look here, you've got several different things. You've got some trees that I made. You've got some purchased trees. You've got some trees that Bill Harder modified to make them look a little more realistic. And I just planted them kind of densely on this. You can see a lot of ground foam. A lot of that is from Woodland Scenics. It really works nicely. Some other things are some little tufts of grass that I don't know exactly who made those. There's some moss mixed in here that we got from Hobby Lobby. Okay. What else? I found someplace one of these little garages. I think it's an Atlas garage. Cut it in half to give me 2 old abandoned buildings, just to give us a little more interest in this area. Okay. And that's what I did here. Here's another thing I worked on. And one of the questions you might ask is, what happens if you come to a situation where someone else has done some scenery? Well, in this case, the campground scene was already done. It had come off another layout, okay? But I had to blend it into this one. The front had just been kind of cut off. So again, what did I do? I took some foam to make the different contours in the front. Again, some sand, some trees. Some of them, like these, came from kits. Again, some of them were from other that had just they were around here. Again, woodland scenics to give us kind of a more brushy idea. But I think it blended in really nice. This road, Rodney wanted the idea of a black and white mix. Some of the roads around here have that kind of look to them. So I took black and gray N-scale ballast and mixed them together to make this road. The only thing I really did to the campground itself was add the Volkswagen bus and a couple people on the picnic bench. But again, I think it blends in very well with what I did in the front. It really looks like it was all done at one time. Here's another area that I looked at. Again, I like the idea of having the trains kind of disappear behind a couple of trees or something like that. That's a lot of the way we actually see trains when we are out rail fanning. So again, foam, the sand used to kind of make the nice smooth contours, trees, some of which I built, some of which I think Bill worked on. But the nice thing I want to mention about here is this is one of the first things that I did. I think a lot of this area kind of looks more like the Georgia clay that you would see, or maybe sometimes even more up north, where you have these areas where the dirt shows, and that's really not what you see down here in Florida much. So one of my projects that I'm going to start pretty soon is to go back, look at some places like this, add some more woodland scenic ground foam and stuff like that to make this look more like Florida, the kind of much more lush greenery that you would see around here. And that's one of the nice things about scenery. If you don't like it, you can always go back and fix it and modify it. So I think this is one area where I'm gonna do that on to make it start looking a little more like Florida. Here we have another group of trees. Again, some of them are commercial, some of them are ones that Bill Harder has modified, and some of the ones are some that I built myself. Notice we have a track going back through the trees, a spur line that's going to eventually serve a lumber mill, a sawmill, And I kind of wanted the idea of trees that were above the track. You know, the engine doesn't go back here very often, so the canopy is actually going to cover the tracks. And commercial trees usually aren't that big. So I went back, went to some bushes that are on the grounds of the condo association where I bought a house, clipped branches, and I built some of these bigger trees. And you can see, this is one I built, this is one I built, there's a little one I built, there's one that's well on its way to dying. But it gives a different feel than just all commercial trees. And then there's little things you can add. You know, the pile of junk, if you can look down in there, there's ashes there, so that's been burned before. Eventually probably somebody will throw a little gasoline on it and get rid of that stuff. I don't know whether you can see it, but there's a hobo resting back there just under the trees. And that's what I've done here. Okay. This is Dennis Street. It's an industrial switching area. Again, when I came here, the buildings were basically in, the track work was in, this road was in, and that was basically it. So the idea here is, what are you going to end up with? You're going to end up with some bigger bushes. You're going to end up with a whole lot of trash. You've got some barrels. You've got some tires. You've got some sections of rail, some old wood dunnage, pallets that people have thrown out. There's some new ties here waiting to be put in. But that, again, the idea was what? You get more bushes, you get some weeds growing along the front of the buildings. So very much a unmanaged, just kind of junk area. And I think it works really nicely here. This is an area where, again, I did the scenery in front. The back scenery was done by somebody else. But when I decided to start working on this, Rodney said, well, you know, there was the bridge tender had this road that came back into that area. He would park his car there and then walk out onto the bridge. So we thought that was just kind of a little neat thing to put on the layout. So we've got the road here, the bridge tender's car. Not too much, you know, not too many people drive on it. So you got some greenery in the middle of it. But again, the idea is to make the front match the back, and so you get a nice scenery, again, done by, in this case, two different people. But I think I did a pretty good job of blending in with what was already there. Okay, remember I said that I sifted the larger stones out of my sand. Well, this is one of the things you can do with them. This is a kind of a model of a cochita wall, and I used these larger stone pieces that I sifted out of the sand. I think I did, well, whoever did it, I might have done it, I don't remember, to give us this stone wall effect. The thing I like about this little thing too is that the little added details. Okay, one of the things I found as I went through some of our junk boxes here was some cast clothing. So gee, we ought to have a clothesline here. So I made a clothesline, just a couple pieces of wire, a little string, and glued them on. The lawnmower sitting in the front, you know, waiting for the man of the house to come back out and put it away. All that just kind of gives it a little more lived-in, feel. Well, that's kind of what I've done here. Some of it was my own experiments. Some of it was looking at what other people have done, and a lot of it was listening to what other people had done and the help that they gave me in developing some of my own ways of working on this. So, in summary, what can I tell you about scenery? Don't be afraid to do it. You've got beautiful things now to work with. Woodland Scenic Express. Stuff you'll find online, things you'll find at places like Hobby Lobby. Some of the stuff you can get from your backyard. Just kind of be careful. Sometimes you want to make sure, like the dirt or you take sand, that it's not magnetic, because obviously that could screw up your motors. But the point is, there's lots of things to do. There's lots of ways to do it. You can read, you can look at videos, and you can develop your own idea. And again, if you don't like what you did once, do it over. That's the great thing about scenery. It's not like, man, I just painted this building and I hate the color and it's a lot of work to redo it. Nah, redoing scenery is easy. So take that as a hint. Don't be afraid. Jump in and enjoy.
Well, thank you, Greg. It's one more reason why this is such an outstanding railroad layout, the Jacksonville Terminal Railroad Museum. And Greg Turn is a great asset and one of the reasons why we are world famous. Well, and that's the way it is in Jacksonville, Florida.